Hi, I'm Renata Bernardi, and this is the Job Hunting Podcast, where I interview experts and professionals and discuss issues that are important for job hunters and those who are working to advance their careers. So make sure that you subscribe and follow, and let's dive right in. Natalie Moore and Lisa Saunders are the ultimate work wives team. They have a keen interest in workplace well-being, and in their own words, they decided to team up because two brains are better than one, and they went into business together to improve workplace well-being. Through their company, Own Your Health Collective, Natalie and Lisa help women achieve holistic health and well-being for work and life. They also offer corporate health and well-being training in the workplace, and you can learn more about them by following the links provided in the episode show notes or the description below if you're watching on YouTube. In this episode, we start by discussing the importance of setting goals and the importance of working together as a team, what your strengths mean and how you can blend strengths with your teammates to maximize your opportunities. The big burnout after 2 years of the pandemic, it's catching up with all of us. It's so interesting because we're kind of at the end of the pandemic, moving into an endemic mode, but so much of my time is spent helping clients cope with the funk that they're feeling and the lack of energy. And it's not surprising to me. I think it's very common, but it's not very well understood. So we talk a little bit about that. And then we move into talking about company well-being, the programs that companies are offering to not only keep their employees, but to attract employees. 2022 is the year of people changing and moving around, and companies are really mindful of that. And we talk about the importance of building good habits. The second half of our conversation in this episode is all about menopause at work. And this is a great conversation for not only women of all ages, but men that have women in their lives, wives, daughters, co-workers, team members. Menopause symptoms or hormonal imbalances can really negatively affect women in the workplace, their career prospects, their ability to advance. And companies are really mindful of that more and more. There's much more grounds to cover, but with the help of organizations like Own Your Health Collective from Natalie and Lisa, we are getting the message through of how important it is to prepare for women's hormonal imbalances at work. And in the end, I also give my 3 reasons to love perimenopause. I have been going through perimenopause for a few years now, and I kind of have a silver lining there. So if you stick around, you can hear what I have to say about that. So listen to this episode and I'll touch base with you at the end of it again. The first thing I'd love to know from you is tell me about your careers and how come you two ended up together. I can sense what's that term that Annabelle Crabb uses? The work wives? A work wife story coming up? Have you read that book? It's a lovely book. I'll put the link in the episode show notes.
I have to read it. It's on my list because I love what she does.
And I have to say, actually, I have a 7.5-year-old, and every time my phone rings, she says to me, "Is that Lisa?" So yes, the whole family, both our families have gotten used to us. Yes, being working wives, definitely. So yeah, look, our career, we have both been through a pretty big career change over the years, and I won't take Lisa's thunder, but for me, I fell into packaging, manufacturing actually, and in sales more specifically. But I had about 10 years in sales roles, working with major corporates, supporting them around their projects and packaging. And, after I had my daughter, I realized it just wasn't for me. It just wasn't fitting my values or the way that I wanted to live or work. And so I thought, you know what, I actually had a moment in the bathroom at my work, and I said, please, dear God, give me a sign that there's something really special out there for me. And had a bit of an epiphany. I'm a very keen, crazy runner, actually. And I thought, you know what? How do I bring my passion of running into a business that just lights me up? And that was sort of the beginning where I come up with this idea to create a subscription box for runners, because I loved motivating people to run and talk about running. And so I was boxing up all these health foods, sports nutrition, and then that morphed into goal setting workshops, because everyone was saying to me, how are you working? Because I was still working 4 days, having a baby, running marathons, doing this little side business. And I thought, how are you not? So, I went through this process of then running goal setting workshops. And to, I guess, really cut a long story short, I then went and studied health and wellness coaching. I've also then done yoga and meditation teacher training. And, that's, I guess, how Lisa and I ended up together, because we found a synergy within our work, and we had complementary passions, me around wellness and mindset, Lisa around nutrition and food coaching. And we decided that two heads are better than one head, and we came together and created Own Your Health Collective. But it's been a journey that we've both been on, in, I guess, changing our careers and really finding that thing that lights us up and makes us feel good, inside and out. And Lisa,
What about you, Lisa?
So, career change as well. I started off my career in the property valuations and management area, actually. And I would say I was good at it, and I did it for quite a while, but I never really loved it. And I always was interested in nutrition. I always tell the story about how I used to drag my mum into health food shops. And so I just want to have, it was like a toy shop for me. And so I always had that keen interest in nutrition and food. European Maltese background, so food has always featured very heavily in the way I grew up. So a few things happened. I had my kids, and the culture that I went back to at work was just different. It didn't align with mine anymore, or my values. And I had my children a little bit later in life, so I wanted to be more available for them. I had a breast cancer scare when I turned 40, so that really rocked my socks. I started, unbeknownst to me, I started to enter into perimenopause in my early 40s and had some pretty full-on ranges of moods and anxiety. And so I actually finished up in that area and did a diploma of food and health coaching, and started my own business. Met Nat through a mutual friend. She came home one day, she rang me, it was quite late, and I said, "Oh, is everything okay?" She said, "Yes, I've just been somewhere and I met this girl called Natalie Moore. You need to talk to her. You guys are like so aligned. It's not fun." I'm going, okay. So I reached out to Nat, and we met over a few times as a bit of a support to each other. We had our respective businesses then, and we used to throw things at each other about, what do you think, blah, blah, blah. And then we actually did an expo together in 2019, in March 2019. And that was hugely successful. And we thought, you know what, we should just take this further. And that's how Own Your Health Collective was born.
Oh, that's such a great story. I love a couple of things that you've said, both of you. First of all, goal setting. It's so important. It's so embedded in the coaching that I do. And personally, I have goal setting to thank for as a theory that I was introduced in very early on in my life, that has really helped me personally. So I love that. And I find that that's very common for sports people and people that enjoy athletics, which is not my case. So for me, I had to kind of create sort of goals for me that were about my life and my values and where I wanted to live and how I wanted to progress with my career and whatnot. But if you come from that athletics background, it's such more easily understood and such a great transferable skill. So if you're listening and like Natalie, you've been running or achieving goals outside of your career, consider transferring that to career goals, because that works too. And the other thing I loved about your story is this idea of joining forces. When I came out of the corporate sector to start my own business, the first thing I did was to find people to collaborate with. First of all, because I didn't want to be lonely. And I feel like so many of us step out of the corporate sector to engage in work that we love as sole traders or under our own companies, but then we isolate ourselves. So the fact that you were humble enough and smart enough to, work together and scale is fantastic. So good on you. Do you want to sort of comment on those things? Because I really liked both of those aspects of your stories.
Yeah, for me, the goal setting's been a huge part of my life. And I have to say, I only got into running when I was 25, so mid 20s. So I'm 40 now, so about 15 years. But it was, that introduction to setting a huge marathon goal and then working towards that, week by week. And I've definitely been able to translate that experience with my running into business and into life as well. Big part of my life, and I can't ever talk enough about actually having goals and working towards those goals.
And I think that the beauty of what you say around running it, going into your own business and having someone else to be able to do that with is really, we're very lucky because we both bring to the business different skills. So Nat's got a great sales background. I'm happy to get into the detail and do the financials and all that, so we're really complementary about what we bring in. So, and it's much easier doing it with two than one.
Yeah.
And it's not lonely too. You can bounce things off each other all the time. And, I'll be working in one room and I'll go, Nat, blah, 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 blah. And, it's just things come to you. It's great. We probably interrupt each other a bit with our work, but it works.
Yeah. That partnership is great. I have a couple of people that work for me as contractors, and I don't have a great team, like a big team anymore, but they are great. And I keep asking them, please tell me when I'm wrong. Please give me feedback. Don't just do what I say. Can you please tell me if this is the right way to go? And sometimes when you hire contractors, they want to please you. So they want to just do whatever you ask them to do, when I actually want the constructive feedback and I want to tap into their expertise. So I'm always asking them for that. So well done. What do you think are the strengths that you bring? I mean, Lisa, you've tapped on that before, that you have complementary skills and they blended together, make you a great team. But if you think about your individual strengths that you have used in your career, and that you're still working on right now, what are they?
Yeah, look, for me, I think it's that honesty is a huge one for me, and I'm very big on strengths and the character strengths, and honesty, always comes up as my top character strength. But being not just honest, but being true to you, that's really put me in good stead over the years. And I can, really reflect and look at times where I wasn't being honest with myself or living in alignment to myself. So, being honest with myself in terms of how I want to show up, the work that I want to do, the interactions that I want to have, living by your values, I think is really important.
That's what I was going to say.
And just, just remembering that we're human, I think, and I've really come to appreciate that over the years and working in the line of work that we have. But, building relationships authentically, mindfully being in someone's presence, and, they're definitely skills that we've built and still continue to nurture today, and do that with working with our clients too.
Yeah, and I would say too, empathy as well, and having that empathy to listen to others and understand where they're coming from. And I think for me, those things started to really sound out quite loud to me around the time that I changed careers, because that empathy wasn't there when I went back to where I was. The culture definitely wasn't a fit. I was, crying out for help at that point in my career, and there just was nothing. I got nothing. I got no help. So it's no, and you've got to be true to yourself. Well, this isn't aligning with me, and I need to move on from it. So, and we've taken that into our work life now and what we're doing.
I love that because sometimes people do the via character strengths, and I use them in my coaching as well, by the way. And they look at the results of the top five, let's say, and think about it as it relates to them, but not how they relate to the world. And it's important to understand it, as you said, Lisa. If empathy is not all around you, it will make you so unhappy. Whereas for someone else that has empathy down, as number 16, they can work in a more sort of political, aggressive environment and not feel as unhappy as you felt. And
Yeah.
for me, and Lisa, Natalie, you mentioned your top one was honesty. I find it really interesting when I do the character strengths test with my clients and they're surprised by what comes at the top. And especially because I work with senior executives, they're like, where's leadership? Leadership is not at the top. and it's funny. My number one or number two, depending on when I do the test, is appreciation of art and beauty. And that serves me never, like I always felt like, what the hell? Like I am an executive. Why is
Because you
this
only
showing up?
you only have to look at your back wall to see what your
Exactly.
piece. I'm looking at it, and that just makes me happy. I think that's fabulous.
So a lot of my clients feel like that whatever comes at the top, we have the tendency to look at the bottom of that what spits out of that result. And I remember feeling like that as well. I'm like, what the hell? Appreciation of art and beauty. What the hell is that? And but also feeling a sense of relief. Aren't you relieved that this is the reason why you're so pedantic about things on the wall and the colors of your couch, or if somebody buys linen that you don't like if your poor husband went out and bought linen and you hated it, that's the reason why. It means so much to you and it doesn't mean so much to him. So that's what I tell people. Like if you get results from any type of assessment, really reflect on it and sort of understand it from the point of view of how you relate to the world. And even if it doesn't serve you professionally, guess what? Eventually it will, because this really helps my clients. Usually, I mean, if you're not watching this on YouTube, you may not see what's behind me, but just look at any photos of mine on Instagram, you will see my background. People come to me and they're so upset and sad and lost their jobs or hate their jobs, and just coming into my Zoom office and seeing this, I hope brings them a little bit of joy. So
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
after 40
well
years, I
said.
found a way for my top strength to serve me somehow.
No, I think it's beautiful.
And it's I guess embracing this learning that we have with curiosity as well, isn't it? Like it's not being closed off to possibilities. It's or looking at honesty and saying, well, yes, I am honest, but hang on, what does that actually look like in terms of how I show up, how people see me, how I interact with the world, with nature? Yeah, it's very powerful when you deep dive and continue to evolve and learn. We always say to clients, we're forever a work in progress. When it, we obviously epitomize health and positive well-being, but we are human as well. And we will fall off the wagon, and we're forever a work in progress. And having that open, curious mind is really powerful.
And do you know what I like too is that the conversation you were just talking about with the values too, Renata, it brings out things that maybe were there that you haven't really delved into. You were talking about the art. It's like they've always been there, but they bring it to the forefront. And it's actually there's a real peacefulness in being able to say, you know what, I've actually always felt like that, but I've never known how to bring it out. Or if it was, that inner critic, I'll just smash it down. That can't possibly be what my value is, and it actually can really bring quite a sense of relief to some people, can't it?
Oh, yes. For me, it gave me a lot of relief because I come from a country with deep political and social economic problems. And to have such shallow interests like fashion and interior design. To me personally, I don't think people were judging me, but I felt bad about it. All
Yeah.
my life, I felt bad. I should be worried about something else. And I overcompensated by being a student activist, by being very involved in politics at a young age, because I was overcompensating because my heart was in what I thought was frivolous pursuits.
Yes. Yeah.
And and I'm like, this is built in my DNA. There's really nothing I can do about it. It's my character strength, and
Yeah.
I can help the world in some way, even if it's helping my friends decorate their houses, which is what I often tend to do. But look, I want to go into the topic of well-being, and I had the intention of starting straight into menopause, but I think maybe we can start a bit sort of progressively towards talking about menopause, because this week has been such an interesting week for me. I've just come out of a session where we were discussing burnout, like really not just I'm burnt out this week. Like I have been burnt out for 2 years and I cannot cope. There are people that are feeling deep in their guts and their brains the consequence of excessive amount of working hours, working from home and coping with everything that comes from being in lockdown, kids and all of that. And even though we're coming out of it in most countries, this podcast is listened all along around the world. So I'm not sure, if you're listening, if you're still in lockdown, you're coming in or you're coming out or whatever. But even in Australia, when we have been in more of a new normal life, it's catching up with us now. When you're, I don't know if you've studied this in psychology, when people they have that survivor syndrome, like you've survived and then you breathe and then you realize that your body just needs to break down and reset, and the lying flat terminology that we're using today for the people that came out of employment, for example, and just are not feeling strong enough to go back in again. There are a lot of young people that are going through that, a lot of people my age and maybe your age too, in their 50s, that are going through that as well. So tell me about your journey in this space, working with individuals and organizations in trying to maintain well-being at work. I'm really curious to know what sort of work you guys are doing.
I'm going to let you answer this one because I know Nat's been working specifically with quite a few people, and you go, Nat. Yeah.
And it's funny, Renata, as you were talking, I just took a deep breath in because I think, there's a lot happening, and I really feel, and we both feel that, the last 2 years is really compounded into this moment right now. And we've sort of gone from 0 to 1,000 overnight, but yet we're still dealing with the baggage of the last 2 years as well. And, there's a lot there to process and a lot to sort of, I guess, look at what we're really feeling. So, for us, we very much talk about well-being from a whole health perspective. So we created our own framework, which isn't new if people looked at it, but it is based on a lot of positive psychology tools out there. And we really want to hone in around the self. So coming back to who you are, who each individual person is, their biology, their physiology, and then looking at the pillars around that person. So your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual health. And, they're not new terms individually, of course not. But we very rarely bring that emphasis together as, one sort of entity that we, should look at, because what happens in our physical health impacts our spiritual health. That impacts our emotional health, our relationships, that then impacts our mental health as well. So when we're working with workplaces and individuals, we basically show them our framework, and it's the circle in the middle, the self in the middle, and then the 4 outer circles all joining together and all made up of different elements. And we encourage people to look at that framework and pick one and say, which one is it that perhaps you're not nurturing as much as you want to be right now? And then let's drill down and say, okay, well, what does that look like? What do you want? And let's pick physical, for example, because that's probably the one people relate to most. Which part of your physical health are you not nurturing? Is it the food? Is it the sleep? Is it the movement? Okay, well, let's break that down further then. What do you want that to look like? And what we see in educating people around the different pillars and choosing one in particular is that we naturally see a flow and effect into other areas. Because when we're thriving physically and we feel well, or even getting a good night's sleep, prime example, we are then more aware of, okay, am I living life to my values? Am I nurturing relationships as I want to be? Am I using my brain and nurturing my mental health as much as I really want to be as well? So that's a big part for us, is very much around coming back to the whole person and looking at it as a whole health message. And then really importantly as well is really, defining what health and wellness looks like for you. And that's why we always bring it back to the individual. What do you want your health to look like? What do you want to feel like? How do you want to show up to people around you? When you go to work, how do you want to feel? How do you want to show up? And then, from there, we then give you strategies around that. And, through mindfulness, through movement, through food, through emotional intelligence, but it's very individual, and really, we encourage people to come back to themselves. What is it that you want? And then let's look at, okay, what do you need from there, and how can we support you through that?
That's the dream, isn't it? I wish everybody had the education to reach out to you and to, tools and resources out there. I find that sometimes people get caught up in the rat race,
Yeah.
and they don't have the time, in brackets, quote unquote, to go and introduce themselves to this very sometimes effective rituals that you do every day. And I can see that you are also working with corporates, because if you are going top down, if you have the organization advocating for wellness, that is such a powerful way of introducing it to professionals, because then it's embedded in the culture, it's embedded in the organization. The organization is telling you to take a break, to do things like my son did an internship in the US when he was at uni, and he said, "Oh, Mom, it's really funny. If I stay at my desk for too long, somebody will come and massage me or tell me to get up and go to the gym."
Oh, I love that. That's awesome,
And that's
isn't it?
such an American thing. Like if you're listening and you're from the US, I mean it with, the best intention. But in Australia, we don't, I don't think I've never seen anything like that. And, yeah, so I guess I'm glad that he was introduced to this at an early age. Hopefully it stays with him. But have you been successful at working with organizations so that they can introduce this to their teams?
Yeah, interesting question. And, I think over the last 2 years, that's really highlighted a gap as well in real, tangible health and wellbeing strategies within workplaces. When we joined forces, health, the first thing we said is we don't want to be a tick and a flick or a nice to have. We want to actually be there embedding health and wellbeing into the culture. Again, coming back to that humanness, we're all humans. Health and well-being is part of us in our working life and in our personal life. So we've had a little bit of success in terms of running some longer programs and introducing key terms, changing the language, getting people to look beyond just a one-off workshop, because that's great in the moment, but how do we actually turn this into sustainable health and well-being, culture, creating that safe, safe and change environment. So, there's a long way to go. And, I think if there's a silver lining from the last 2 years is that, there's been renewed focus around how important it is to support employees, but there's still a long way to go in terms of really making this part of life and work and cultures.
And it's that mindset, because Nat mentioned that tick and flick, and It's the mindset of actually doing a longer program through the corporate workplace that we're probably finding the most resistance around at the moment. Everyone, we live in a society where we want it quickly. We talk to people one-on-one. We do a lot of work with women, as you know, and the coaching that we do is not quickly. It's just small and manageable. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to that habit that you have around how you conduct your day. And it's those changes in habits, whether they be big things or little things, which is where we see the success happening. So whether it's an individual basis or in the workplace, that's the kind of change that we need to instill, that it's not all quick. We just want something so quickly. Oh, it's not coming up, or it's not doing what you said. It's just like, be patient. And
Yes.
that's probably one of the biggest things that we find is really sabotaging people's or corporates' mindset around what we do.
That's such a good point. I'll share with you how I coach clients, and maybe this might be something you want to reflect on, because the first module we do is long-term scenario planning, and really identifying with as much detail as you can how your future is going to be 20 years from now. And not just by imagining it, but writing it down, like, what's my day like? What time do I wake up? What do I do that day? I have a speech that I need to write. And there's a whole bunch of exercises that we do in this first module, so that it's part of that goal setting thing that we mentioned before, but it's just cementing and crystallizing your preferred future. And that is such an empowering thing when you're working with that immediate needs that you have, because if you're moving towards this future 20 years from now, it's something happens that kind of mocks up your plans for the next week. It's not as important anymore. All of a sudden you have this great future ahead of you. You have a vision board that, I have two in front of me. I have a long-term vision board and a short-term vision board, and that keeps you grounded. So if you lose your job, if the pandemic happens, if somebody gets sick, it's okay. It's just something that you might have to incorporate as your another stepping stone towards that preferred future. And I wonder if this is something that organizations and individuals can also do in terms of the work you do in the well-being space. In terms of well-being for women, what have you, like you, Lisa, I also started perimenopause at the age of 41 for me. And
Did you know then that it was perimenopause, Renata?
I did
Yeah.
straight away, because it was very clear. The signs were clear. And my mom and my grandmother, both of them also same age, 41. So it was like, tick, tick, tick. It happened to me.
The genetics is playing out for you nicely then.
Yeah.
In a way for what to
It's really funny. And I have a sister, she's younger than me, and she has MS. And we were on the phone a few years ago, and she's like, oh, I'm having all these issues. I think my MS is getting worse. And it's funny when it's not funny that she has MS at all, but it's interesting when people have a chronic disease and then like go into menopause or catch a cold, whatever it may be. They don't really know what's, the chronic disease and what's just something else. And I'm like, darling, this is called menopause. It's really not MS. I'm pretty sure, I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you, if you're waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning, you're having hot flushes, guess what? It's not MS.
Yeah.
So we had that conversation, and it started early for her as well, I suppose. But that is a terrible thing for women in the workforce, isn't it? As soon as we give birth and the kids get, older and get into high schools or whatever, gosh, we have something else to deal with. And it's so annoying. At a time when you're about to feel free and have more time to yourself, all of a sudden you're getting palpitations, you're not feeling 100%, your brain is foggy. Like, I really felt it. And my rational being was trying to manage it, whilst my reptile brain was just not coping with it. And I think for the past decade, I found it really hard to sort of keep up with work. And I think opting to have my own career and setting my own time was a consequence of basically too much menopausal symptoms. If I look back, I'm not blaming it. I think it's actually a blessing that I have my own business. But gosh, it's much easier to manage my symptoms now that I work for myself. So what have you researched, and what do you understand are the issues that women face when they reach that age where hormonal imbalances can affect their careers?
I think so. Some of the issues, I suppose, even just talking about the symptoms, the biggest one is what you just alluded to, the hot flashes. That sleeping and how that impacts them so heavily. We all know that if we haven't had a great night's sleep for one night, how that can really mess us up. And unfortunately, so many women experience this night after night, and then they're trying to do their work the next day and finding it really hard to concentrate. Their energy levels are terrible. And then there's all the silent stuff, like the heart palpitations, the the sleep deprivation, all of those type of things really affect the female, and it actually has a big effect on the company as a whole, doesn't it? Because you've got these really well educated or experienced women that are going into the next level of their working life, and bang, it really hits them. And look, from my perspective, I mentioned before the anxiety. Definitely a drop in confidence really does come about with a lot of women. And whereas they've been confident to do things in the workplace previously, they start second guessing themselves. And I remember thinking back in my early 40s that I started doing that. And I'm thinking now, why am I second guessing myself about something? I didn't know, really know. I'm about to turn 52. So in my early 40s, I didn't really realize that's what I was going through. And it's only through a change of career and research and study that now I'm obviously very aware of it. But that confidence is a real biggie. And that's why some women actually end up leaving the workforce, and they don't have that support. And women in the workforce, they're not really looking for a solution from their workplace from a perimenopause and a menopause perspective. They're looking for support for all of these symptoms that they can be feeling. So it's a real biggie actually in the workplace, and why women are leaving. And look, they do talk about, there are stats out there saying there's more women than ever having their own businesses now. It'd be awesome to see more research behind why they're starting their own businesses. Is it because they just want to do that and that's just their next calling? Or like yourself, that you're having these symptoms and it's forcing you almost to actually be able to manage them better, to be able to do your own thing, which then leads to other issues too, because it can be you and I know it can be a lonely existence where you're not having that interaction with other people, you're not learning from other people, and then you don't really feel like going out and networking because you feel so miserable and horrible at the time too. So there's so much leads on from how you're feeling.
Yeah. And from my experience with clients that are going through perimenopause, I find that the lack of confidence then leads them to accept jobs at a lower pay rate. It leads them to not advance in their career and fulfill their dreams and achieve the goals that they had set out for themselves years prior. And they feel that lack of energy, I don't feel like I have it in me anymore. There's this lack of energy. And like you, Lisa, sometimes they don't see this as hormonal imbalances. They just think that they're just old at 43, at 44. And I'm like,
it's like,
you can still be a CEO if you want to,
that's exactly right.
But there is this feeling like, no, I'm too old for it now, because they're not sleeping. the brain is foggy.
Yes.
They don't have an energy that they used to in the past, and they are not managing that hormonal imbalance in any way, shape, or form, and all of a sudden their career starts crumbling down. So what have you been able to achieve, or have you learned in terms of best practices for organizations to support their female employees? Have you seen anything working in terms of addressing menopause at work?
Look, there's a few examples in Australia, but I think the UK is really leading the way in this area. And, they're talking about it in Parliament. They've recently introduced menopause education in the school curriculum, which is something we desperately need to do here. Women and men need to be really aware of this life cycle that we go through. Years ago, women were probably living to their 50s, maybe 60s. We're living another third of our life in menopause. So it's really something that we need to be supporting in the workplace. And I suppose one of my biggest beefs is I see things, on LinkedIn from people that are saying, oh, we're great, we've got this parental leave, we've got all these different types of leave, but we have nothing that's being talked about in relation to menstrual leave policies or menstrual policies, menopause policies. So yeah, that's something that I would love to see more of as well. Nat, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's a huge education piece here. And, it starts really with the woman herself, because we have countless conversations with clients and, so many friends, family, they don't know what perimenopause is. My 72-year-old mother, when I said I was, working in perimenopause, she said, what's that? All she knew was menopause. She didn't know, the umbrella term around perimenopause.
And actually, we've both had a conversation with friends in their 30s, 40s that, we'll be on a walk, we talk about it, and they go, oh, what's perimenopause? So,
can you explain for the listeners, like there will be people in the audience that don't know the difference?
Sure.
Can you
so
just compare and contrast?
Yeah, so the perimenopause is the lead up into menopause. So it can be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. It really depends on the individual. And then menopause, and you can have these host of symptoms that happen that, we've been alluding to as well. So there's over 30 symptoms that a woman can experience. Some of them might experience one or two, some none, lucky them, and some quite a few. And then you move into menopause. And menopause is that day that precedes or that occurs 12 months after your last period or menstruation. So basically, a lot of women often don't realise or can't remember. But basically, it's that 12-month mark anniversary. The symptoms that we talk about may keep going. They could subside. It really is very individual. So, we're taught in the school curriculum around, biology, around having a baby, how to get pregnant, having a period, menstruating, all that kind of stuff. But that seems to be where it stops. It doesn't talk about these other things that can happen or that will happen in a woman's life. And funnily enough, when we've presented to corporates around menopause in the workplace, it's astounding how many men that are in that discussion that say, I have just learned so much information, and it's great because now I can understand what my wife, my sister, my mother is going through. So it's not just as powerful for women, it's powerful for men, for everyone in the workplace. And in fact, there was an article that I posted about in LinkedIn a few weeks ago around a company whose name escapes me in the UK that have put in a menopause policy and menopause training within their training at work. And they were saying just how wonderful it is, especially for their managers that have employees that are going through menopause and perimenopause, just to be able to understand it and help them through it. A lot of managers won't actually put up their hand or approach others for fear of saying the wrong thing or not understanding it. But how powerful is it that if we can be training corporates in the corporate workplace around what it is, what you can do, the policies you can be putting into place, and the simple things that you can be doing. Because at the end of the day, a lot of this comes back to the lifestyle things that we do. Those pillars that we talked about. And yes, there's medical help that women can be receiving. And we know you've had Dr. Fatima Khan on the podcast, and she's a very big believer in marrying the two, the lifestyle options as well as the medical options. And I think that if we sort of just look at it simply, we can be doing so much in the workplace around supporting women so they can stay at work and they can move on to that CEO role that they've got their eye on, or whatever it looks like to them.
Yes.
That was a long answer to your question. Sorry.
No, that was a great answer. And if there are men listening, bless you, keep listening, because I think, as you said, Lisa, if you're a leader of men and women, and, you are going to want to bring the best out in them and make sure that they are achieving and performing at the highest level as part of your team, it's really important to understand what's going on behind in their lives, and they may not be addressing it with you, but it can be something that you subtly start to acknowledge and understand and manage as well. What would be your best tips for women in the workplace that may have started feeling the symptoms or want to be prepared for what's ahead? How do you think that they should address it for themselves and for the work? Should they bring it up with their employers, for example? Should they just keep it to themselves? How do you usually, what are your usual recommendations for women in that situation?
So there's a whole psychological safety piece there as well for workplaces, that, leaders, they need to create a safe environment for women to talk about it, because, we hear so many, whispered conversations about menopause. So really that's an important piece. And again, it's coming back to yourself. It's about learning about your body and knowing what you're going through. So I'm 40, I'm not in perimenopause, but part of what we do and part of my passion is, educating women before they get to perimenopause. My life up until a few years ago was all about, I'll worry about falling pregnant when I'm there, or I'll worry about my, menstrual periods, when I have to. So it's about that education, because the more we know about our body, the more that we can then, feel and hear the subtle changes that are happening within us. And, we are so busy, we are conditioned constantly in autopilot that we miss the little things happening in our body. So, really coming back to ourselves, understanding our body, understanding our cycle first and foremost, and, really tuning into those changes. And then, in a workplace context, really piggybacking off, if there is, someone that you could talk to in a safe environment about what you're experiencing, particularly if menopause isn't front of mind in the workplace or even spoken about at all, finding that person that you could perhaps talk with. We hear a lot, and something that we very much advocate too is creating that support network within the workplace. Women just want to know that, there's a level of comfort that other women are going through it. And I think, I liken it as well to being a business owner too, that you want to have comfort knowing that there's other people who are feeling, thinking, doing what you're doing. And very much the same thing in a workplace context. If you haven't got that leader that you can comfortably talk to, where can you create, a support network that you guys can talk to each other, or even if it's through Messenger, just being able to reach out and share what it is that you're experiencing. So really, it's that education, it's that connection, and, really talking and trying to, I guess, openly share what you're experiencing. Do you want to
I have a story to tell. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
Do you want to say something, Lisa?
Story?
I've done this throughout my life, and then later I found out that this is a thing, but I don't know if it's as common as I would like it to be, which is women in the corporate sector who work on a very tight calendar and have all of their events and board meetings and everything booked a year ahead, as you know, some of us used to have or still have. I used to merge my menstrual cycle into that. And if I had the control over when events could happen, let's say board meetings, I was head of governance for a couple of years in one organization. I was a CEO of another one. If I was planning out my board meetings ahead of time, guess what, ladies? I would try to avoid the times when I was grumpy. we as women, we go through ebbs and flows with our energy levels. That has a cyclical sort of monthly cycle, if we're lucky and we have more regular menstrual cycles, which I was. You know, my cycles were very very great. They were easy to lock down into my calendar. And I was once locking board meetings for an organization that I worked for, and my boss at the time said, "Yeah, well, can it be the next week?" And I said I preferred that it was in this week, if that's okay with you. And he's like, "Do I want to know why?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think you want to know. I can tell you why if you want me to be specific." He was a guy. He said, "No, all right then, if you have the control, just take it. Don't take it for granted, because working in a high stressful, high performance stressful environment when you are not feeling 100%, which undoubtedly you will be, once a month, then if you can take control over that, then use it. Make sure that you use it, especially as you advance in your career. It gives you more and more opportunity to take control. And if you don't have control, then remember that you don't have control, and that day or that couple of days you need to pace yourself.
Did you know Renata was going to bring that up?
No.
I when you said I have a story, I thought, oh, she's going to talk about her cycle, because it's really funny, because not funny, but it's we actually do work in that area, and we have a program called the Female Advantage. And what that does, it's a 28-day program that takes you through your cycle and the ebbs and flows that you talked about. We liken it to the seasons of the year. So each cycle has 4 seasons as well, and how your energy might be, how your movement might be, how you would avoid some meetings at some time and you would power up and actually definitely have those meetings at another time. The food that you might eat, it's all, and if you can be so well connected to your body, like you have just explained, Renata, it leading into perimenopause, where your cycle actually becomes a little bit irregular, but you can still sense about where you are and how your energy might be at that time. And then leading into menopause also, it's such a wonderful thing to be doing and acknowledge and actually live by, because it really does have its benefits. So I'm really happy to hear that's how you used to manage it.
The good thing about working with other women is that the cycles synchronize. So then it's the calendar for that year serves everybody. How funny. Natalie and Lisa, is there anything else that we haven't touched today that you want to bring up? I'd love to, sort of touch on anything that you really wanted to talk about that I haven't asked you.
Probably a key message for us, and especially in perimenopause, and it really feeds onto from your story, and also that female advantage work that we do. Perimenopause, menopause is another phase within our life. And, we sort of feel that, everything that's happened or led us to that moment really comes to the surface during perimenopause. And it's a great time to reflect and grow and, set some new intentions for, say, the next 20, 30 years ahead of us. And so, we, I guess, really want women to look at this phase with, this perimenopause power. I'm coming into my power, and I can define what this phase of life looks like, feels like, how I show up. And, I've mentioned that a few times in our conversation, but, menopause has been so synonymous with, a grey, haggard old woman, and it's not, and I guess talking to us, we're at different spectrums, but my whole perception around what perimenopause is very different to what it would have been, a few years ago. So it's looking at, this phase of life with a lens, an opportunity lens, and, coming back into us that, okay, yes, it's the death of one part of us, but it's the rebirth of, the next phase. And, how do I come into my power during this?
I like to call it finding your brilliance. And we actually have a one-on-one coaching program it takes a deep dive into perimenopause and menopause. And it's all about finding your brilliance, because we tend to concentrate on all that negativity, but we want to flip that and have a look at, okay, yep, there's not some great stuff happening, but let's look at all the good stuff that can be happening. And what does that look like to you individually?
I'm going to list 3 things that I think are great for the phase that I'm in now.
Beautiful.
I was always cold all my life, and it's wonderful to feel warm. Wonderful.
What you feel like, yeah.
Sometimes I yell, my husband is working next door. He has his office next to mine. And sometimes I yell, is it really hot or is it just me? Like, I'm like, wow, look at this, like this warmth from within. After 9 years of this, I'm a bit annoyed already. But at the beginning, I was so amazed about how hot I could be. And I had never been this hot before. The second thing is that I have lots of great white pants. And I've just bought a white bikini, so I'm very happy.
Nice.
This wouldn't have happened 2 decades ago, a decade ago. And third is if you are able to pace yourself, manage your energy levels, the things you can achieve at this age when your kids have grown up, when you are, free of so many things, less mental load. Oh my goodness, I feel so energized by it. And I think that's, so the 3 positives for me. I'd love to hear from the listeners. If you found this, send me an email or write me a note on social media. And let me know if you have other positives to add to this great phase of our lives. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll share with you, Natalie and Lisa, as well when I hear back from the audience.
Beautiful.
Now, I'm going to add all of your contact details, profiles, website, LinkedIn, everything to the episode show notes. So everyone, if you're listening and you want to get in touch with Natalie and Lisa, just look at the episode show notes and the links will be there for you. Ladies, thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful to get to know you a little bit more. I hope that we keep in touch.
We'd love that.
Definitely would love that.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Lisa and Natalie. It was a pleasure to talk to them. I had a great time. Please connect with them on social media. Check out their website. I will have a link to those below in the episode show notes or the description if you're watching on YouTube. If you have not linked with me on social media, why not? Sign up for my YouTube channel. I am on all social media platforms, I think. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, of course. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Twitter, Facebook. This podcast has a private Facebook group. So all of that, the links are in the episode show notes, of course. And if you want to work with me, check out my website. It's also in the episode show notes. It's renatabernardi.com, RENATABERNARDE.com. And enough of self-promotion. I love having you here and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye for now.